Hi, I'm Joe.
And I'm Mike.
And you're listening to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up? The podcast. And this week we're reviewing The Hateful Eight.
Sponsored by the Fraternal Order of Police. Break a leg, Quentin. Welcome to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up? The podcast, featuring two guys getting drunk as boiled owls and reviewing movies in a weekly podcast form.
And this week, what does that even mean? Just
no idea.
I think we found that in a list of synonyms for drunk.
Well, it was boiled as drunk owls and then drunk as boiled hours were the two versions. And I couldn't find an origin for either of them, but it is a widely used term for some reason.
Wow. All right. Well, I'll have to keep that in mind.
We're going to keep using it.
All right. So this week we'll be drinking Big Wave Golden Ale by the Kona Brewing Company. And this was recommended to us by one of our Facebook fans, Tom Toomey. Tom Toomey, one of my good friends. We used to
toss this to you, Joe.
Oh gosh, toss it. Oh, it almost hit me in the face. All right.
It could have ended poorly.
Came a lot harder.
Sorry. That's what she said.
Used to work with Tom Toomey at a this'll date it. I'm an old man, this'll date it. Ecker Drugs. So yeah. Long back. Thank you, Tom. I've already cracked into one of these. It's let me just take a sip now though.
Glug 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 glug.
I like it. It's nice and light. It's just I think Tom also kept in mind I feel like everybody keeps in mind.
IPA,
Yeah, that it's not an IPA. So it's nice and light, and I don't know. It's a good taste. It's a good taste. It tastes
Works for me.
Tropic. All right.
Thanks, Tom.
Hey, thanks, Tom.
So, like we said, we're going to be reviewing The Hateful Eight this week. And to jump right into the IMDb description, it is, in the dead of a Wyoming winter, a bounty hunter and his prisoner find shelter in a cabin currently inhabited by a collection of nefarious characters.
Ooh.
One might even call them hateful.
All right. So I'm just going to go on with my spiel just to bring us up to speed in this episode. So before we get into this just unnecessarily long film. Oh, did I say that out loud? Did I already bring up just a bias into this review? But before we get into it, I do want to talk about our theater experiences, and more specifically, the roadshow that coincided with the film's release. For those of you who are unfamiliar, the film was shown in 70mm in select cities around the country for a limited amount of time. So limited that they ended it a week earlier than they said they would. And I missed it completely. Great organization. Great work for everyone who put this on. Thank you for letting me miss this. However, Mike was fortunate enough to catch the 70mm showing, and so now we're going to go over to him. And
Yes.
if you wouldn't mind telling us
Fortunate
about
is the word.
Yes, fortunate.
It was expensive. It was $18 per ticket.
What?
Yeah, $18. So very expensive.
What are the...
But it was for sure an experience that is unlike any other, just because of what they did. They handed out these basically like playbills for the special roadshow engagement. It's like the size of a calendar. It's this full color thing. It's got all the dates on the back. And it's just like all these neat photos from production and facts about whatever went on during production in it. And they were very adamant about making sure everyone got one. They handed them out when you bought a ticket. They handed them out when you walked into the theater. And then on every single seat in the theater was one. So I was able to bring back a ton of extra ones.
Wow.
They really, really wanted you to have this to get your $18 fucking dollars worth. And then other things that were different, like literally the theater manager came out and gave an introduction before the movie, which was pretty cool, just kind of telling us what to expect. She gave us a warning about the quality of the movie, just because some people aren't used to that real film grain quality.
Okay.
She's like, you're going to see, you know, specks every now and then fly up on the screen. There are going to be certain parts where it might show up a little blurrier than others. That's part of just the nature of projecting actual, you know, large format film.
Right.
And then she told everyone, you know, don't panic. The letterboxing is intentional. Like it's basically an ultra widescreen film in this format. So I guess she was saying that people had been complaining after previous showings, and I don't know if they directly asked for their money back, but they went and complained about those type of things. So that was interesting, just to have a theater manager speak before a film. Then there was no previews whatsoever.
Really?
Yeah. Which, thank God, because it was so long to begin with.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's why. And then I'm guessing this wasn't in, because you saw the standard. I'm guessing this wasn't in your version. The movie actually begins, and there's just 5 minutes of overture, which is just, they just says the word overture on the screen.
Yeah, no, that wasn't.
It's got this like silhouette in like black and red of like mountains and like a guy on like a carriage from the opening scene. And just for 5 minutes, you just hear the score and look at overture. Keep in mind, I went to see this with my roommate Jordan, and we showed up half an hour like before the movie started, thinking like this is a big engagement, like we got to be here on time.
Right.
I kind of wish we hadn't, just because of how long the theater experience ended up being.
Right.
So you have the overture, then the film starts. I don't know, because I know some takes are shorter in the standard version, because the Roadshow version is 187 minutes long. Wow. And the standard, which you saw, is 167 minutes long, and you still felt that was too long.
Yeah.
Yeah, take into account the Roadshow 187 minutes. I don't know if that's accounting for because there's a 12-minute intermission halfway through. Jeez. Where just the lights come on, the screen goes black, and you can get up and walk around.
Why?
Because it's so long. I mean, I understand why they did it, but I almost wish they would have just kept going all the way through the film, just so I could get out of there at that point. Because I didn't stand up. Like, I didn't want to lose my seat. I wasn't going to go get food anywhere. But, I mean, was the opening shot in the standard version, is it really, really long?
Yeah. And yeah, I wanted to get into that, yeah.
Yeah. All right, so I didn't know if that was just something from the Roadshow. But yeah, so you have the overture for 5 minutes.
Oh, my God.
And then you have to sit through this. It's just this really painfully slow shot of, I forget what it's zoomed in on at first, but it's just slowly zooming out to be this basically like stone crucifix statue thing in the middle of nowhere. And then eventually you see a carriage start rolling up in the distance, but it literally takes like 5 to 7 minutes of just the slowest zoom out you've ever seen. Which I think kind of just describes the entirety of this movie. It
really sets the tone.
It's just Quentin Tarantino doing whatever the fuck he wants and not caring what anyone thinks or what it's going to do to the experience. I mean, overall, it was kind of cool, just because I can't say I've ever seen a movie that was like that in terms of the theater experience. But I don't know that it was worth $18 for this playbill thing that it's cool to look at now as we're talking about the movie, but I'm not going to frame it or anything. It's going to get thrown out at some point.
Yeah.
So I don't know that you really missed anything.
Yeah, so I guess I'm not as bitter now that I'm hearing about this, about missing in the Roadshow. I was just excited for it because, I mean, it is 70 millimeter. I really enjoyed seeing the 65 millimeter showing of Paul Thomas Anderson's The Master, which was very cool. And again, I would have loved to see something like that again, but this kind of sounds like a nightmare.
I think there's something in here. Let me go to the technical details, because me and Jordan were looking at this before the movie even started. It's advertised as a 70 millimeter Roadshow engagement. Right. But it was actually 65 millimeter film capture, anamorphic lenses with 1.25x compression. So I don't really know how they're advertising it as 70 millimeter when it was.
Well, it's 70 millimeter, and I think Jordan's right behind us. When it's 65 millimeter, but
our technical consultant, release print 70 millimeter.
Because, like, again, it's an anamorphic lens. And Jordan, am I saying this right? That when, unless it is in 70 millimeter, then it looks bizarre in 65? I mean, I don't want to get too into it, but just give a reason.
To my knowledge,
right,
it was captured on 65 millimeter on anamorphic lenses, which, squeezes the image, right?
Right.
And then it was
so then they stretch it back out for the release.
And then I guess they rescanned it onto 70 millimeter.
Okay, fair enough.
It was just weird to like be the entire thing is 70 millimeter roadshow engagement, and then you look at the technical details and it was filmed on 65 millimeter.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm sure they know what they're doing way better than we do.
All right. So to start, and I'm sure we'll come back to this. And I feel like I've started doing this. Like, let's talk about the director, Quentin Tarantino. He's directed. Get ready for it. Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, Jackie Brown, Kill Bill Volumes 1 and 2, the Death Proof segment of Grindhouse, Inglourious Bastards, and Django Unchained. I don't know what the point of listing all of those was. I guess I'm just trying to set some sort of context of who Quentin Tarantino is, and it's kind of hard to explain to somebody who doesn't. But I guess two things that are worth mentioning, I guess. Quentin Tarantino serves as a screenwriter for all of his films, and I feel like I still kind of consider him like a cult director, if that sounds fair.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely broken through.
Definitely,
he's a household name at this point. But he still, I think, approaches films as if he's a cult director.
Yeah.
His films, because of his success, have turned into blockbusters, but they're not necessarily the type of movie that you would say, he's filming a blockbuster type movie.
It's not Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
It's not Star Wars. All right.
Definitely, cult is definitely the best way to describe him, just in terms of his fan base. We've touched on, I think we touched on it in the intro episode, but just when we went to college, everybody was all about Quentin Tarantino, Boondock Saints, and zombies and whatnot. Like, there's just a certain type of
person who
film
likes
fan that is attracted to those types of movies. Not that you can't appreciate his movies from outside of that lens, but there's a very bigoted and just narrow lens that only views film through what does Quentin Tarantino do, what did they do in the Boondock Saints, and are there zombies?
Right, yeah. All right, so I feel like the best way to approach this film review or discussion is to walk through the plot a bit, because it is essentially just a very simple plot. I mean, for the most part, most of the first half takes place in a stagecoach, and most of the second half is spent in or around the location of Minnie's haberdashery. So again, like you were just saying, when we're talking about the 70 millimeter, I think right off the bat, the first shot rubbed me the wrong way.
Yeah.
The film spends, like, no exaggeration, over 10 minutes staring at this, like, snow-covered cement statue of Jesus on a crucifix. And in a way, this shot just encapsulates just the ridiculous amount of time wasted in this just over 3-hour-long movie.
It's like it's not like the movie really had that much to do with like religion.
Right,
it'd be one thing if like there was these deep discussions they were having about God throughout it. But I don't know if they even bring up religion or God at any point throughout the entire. There's not even like a preacher character or something. It's just, it happened to be this cool thing, I guess, that they found when location scouting maybe. And yeah, that's a cool establishing shot, but for like 5 to 10 minutes of just slow zoom, there's nothing else that we need to gain from looking at this. I don't know if it was something where the score was already written and he just wanted to match it to that.
Right, yeah.
Or if he, intentionally stood on that statue for that long, hoping that Ennio, or whatever his name is, the composer, would come up with a really cool score. Right. Which he did, but not enough to justify that length. Not to spend too much longer than we need to on that opening shot, but it set the tone where I was like, what am I getting in for? Right.
In about Ennio Morricone, I don't know if you want to get into it now. I mean, I feel like you discussed it a little bit, but he scores the film, and he won the Golden Globe for this. But I just wasn't that great of a score. Like, I feel like it definitely doesn't hold a candle to like his previous scores, like like Once Upon a Time in the West, or the very iconic The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Even though The Hateful Eight is a quote-unquote Western, it's kind of just a waste of time to have somebody who is just, I feel like he's like a one-trick pony where he composes like these more like sprawling, grandiose kind of like themes.
I mean, I think it definitely helps to push the movie more towards that Western feel. Right. Because, I mean, it's Wyoming, so the location does sort of it doesn't feel as Western as like a traditional like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly or something like that.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Whereas I think this helps to push it more into that category, which is definitely what Quentin wanted. But yeah, it's not anything terribly inventive. I think maybe we would appreciate it more if it was someone, paying homage to his type of style rather than him just doing what he's always done,
Right.
just 40 years after the fact.
Yeah.
It is cool that Quentin was able to get him to come out of, I don't know, not necessarily retirement, but to compose a film score again for a Western. Definitely something much more gruesome and modern than his previous work.
Oh, definitely.
It is just kind of a cool tidbit.
Yeah.
And it's not a bad score.
No,
but
it's not a bad score.
It's
I
not
just don't
something you
think
really
it's
want to listen to on your own.
the best score. I don't know.
It doesn't necessarily heighten some of the emotions as much because it is kind of just, in my opinion, like a deadpan film throughout.
But let's go just get back into the plot. I kind of got off topic there, but anyway, we have Kurt Russell, this bounty hunter or the hangman, riding in a stagecoach with his latest bounty, who is Jennifer Jason Leigh,
I think.
and her just painfully fake black eye. I hated that black eye makeup. It was just like so bizarre looking. I just thought that was just terrible makeup. And the second thing I didn't like about this at all was Jennifer Jason Leigh. And I know I'm in some sort of a minority for saying that because she was up for a Golden Globe?
Yeah.
And then she was
maybe, I think so.
Then she was also nominated. She's nominated for an Oscar for supporting actress. But her performance just so cartoony, and I don't know if that's necessarily her fault or how the character's written, but it's so cartoony, and I think she's the most cartoony like character that we've ever seen in a Quentin Tarantino movie. Usually his violence is sort of cartoony, like how exaggerated it is. And it's like overly animated almost, but his characters are always sort of dark and brooding and angry and like quiet people, where she was like she was always like pumping her arm and like...
Yeah, I guess I could see that, but I think she was kind of like the comic relief for a lot of parts of the movie.
Right.
Not that she was terribly funny.
Yeah.
I appreciated her performance. I don't know if that it's one of the best of the year.
Yeah, no, I definitely don't.
I didn't mind it.
And then very quickly, the film establishes one of its reoccurring punchlines is going to be Kurt Russell just like beating the shit out of her. And I don't
Nice.
And I don't care so much that like she's a woman, equal rights. Beat a woman too. No. That's a terrible joke. Which I know some people did have a problem with that. But I mean, they kind of go into that in the film. She's like a woman should be tried in like the same way like a man should be tried.
Yeah, they do cover that.
But it was what more bothered me about it was just that it was a
punchline.
It built such a reliance on like slapstick humor.
A punch.
Yeah. Like at some parts it felt like now I can't think of like whatever. It was just super slapsticky.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily mind. This sounds weird out of context, but I don't necessarily mind violence against women in film based on the portrayal of it, because it's something that happens in real life, so we do have to portray it in film.
Right.
But when you portray it as kind of like a joke and something that we're just laughing at repeatedly, like, ha, he hit that woman again. Like, yeah, I know her character's not the greatest, moral character. No one in this movie is. So it's hard to really feel bad for anyone. But it does. There is something that feels inherently wrong about laughing at a man hitting a woman on screen repeatedly for jokes.
Yeah, that's the only character in this film that's just getting hit over and over again. And it like relies so hard as to be like a slapstick punchline, and I just think Quentin is above that.
Yeah.
Especially with his writing, which he's usually good at. So, I mean, anyway, then Kurt Russell goes on to give Samuel L. Jackson and Walton Goggins, if that's his name. I don't know
how to... the actor's name? Or?
Yeah, I believe that's the actor's name. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right.
Oh, yeah, he's the guy from he's Justified and...
Yeah.
He's been in a bunch of other stuff.
But,
Gives them a ride.
Right, yeah. And it's through these characters that we discover more that the setting is like this post-bellum or post-war Wyoming. And yeah, and then really in the second half of the film, these characters and a whole new slew of characters all settle down into Minnie's haberdashery to wait out a blizzard for like 3 days.
Yeah, and that's where we meet the rest of the Hateful Eight. The title characters are all these 8 characters that are just holed up in Minnie's haberdashery, which I guess is a place that Kurt Russell has known before, and even Samuel Jackson is pretty familiar. A lot of the characters have been there before. I guess it's a frequent stop on whatever path to where are they going? Red Rock City, I think they're going.
Yeah, Red Rock something.
So yeah, they're holed up there during this epic blizzard for, I guess they figure to be there for about a couple days, and
right.
The movie ensues from there.
Chaos
ensues.
It ensues.
Quentin ensues.
So obviously, and this isn't even something I have written down as one of my bullet points to discuss, but I feel like seeing the trailer, I remember you described it so perfectly as this did look like a more contained, perhaps like a bottle episode of a television series, because it's a bunch of people in a small place, and it's a very contained plot or thought or whatever.
Essentially just one location. It appears from the trailer.
And that's literally what it is.
Yeah, well, now there's 2 locations.
Right, yeah.
But that's it.
But
also let it be known, it takes a while before they get to Minnie's haberdashery.
Oh no,
everything in this film takes a while, but there's just a long time of just dialogue between Samuel L. Jackson and Kurt Russell, and then when they pick up Walton Goggins, dialogue between the 3 of them, and
it's literally
on and on.
The first half of the movie. It's just that.
I think there was 5 chapters, maybe.
I have no idea.
4 or 5. They divided up by chapters. I'd have to look up the names of them, but I want to say that I think the first 2 are just in the carriage.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. I don't know. There's just a bunch of. Speaking of the chapters, another thought that comes to mind that I didn't even think of until now, since I haven't thought in the movie, is at two different places, I guess, or maybe just one chapter, and it's like Jason, Jennifer Lee, whatever her name is, like that character knows a secret because somebody like poisons coffee and only she knows. And then all of a sudden, like it just says that, and then you just hear like Quentin Tarantino's voice. It's him narrating, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And he's
horrible.
like, yeah, I know. And he's like, this chapter's called so and so knows a secret because this character saw that this was like, and it was just like so. This movie.
Few problems with that.
Right.
I dislike immensely when narration is not used consistently throughout a movie.
It was
when it's
there
just
was like
used,
2 or 3 lines.
When it's just used to cover up weak plot holes, or where they think the audience might not understand something. Like it almost seems like something thrown in after the fact. Like, oh, we forgot to film that one scene that would have explained this, or we forgot to write that one scene. Let's throw some narration in there where we can just say a few sentences and accomplish that without making the film longer than 3 hours and 7 minutes. Second thing is that Quentin Tarantino's voice quality does not fit the Western genre or even really any of his movies in any way. Like when you see the type of movies that he produces and then you look at how weird and just how quirky Quentin Tarantino is, he doesn't have the voice quality that you want to hear for something like this. You want like a rustic, like Sam Elliott, like
a gruff.
And now Jennifer Jason Leigh knows a secret, and no one else knows this secret. But Coors, the banquet beer.
But it stuck out like a sore thumb.
Yes.
I don't know why that was in there. And just I'm curious,
so
corny to narrate your own movie too.
In the Roadshow version, there's the intermission, so you guys don't have the intermission at all. But because I think it's when the 3rd chapter comes back, or maybe the 4th, someone dies, and then it comes back immediately after that kind of jarring death, and then he's explaining what happened in like the 15 minutes after that death. Is that the same thing in the standard?
Same thing,
okay, I just want to be sure about that. Because I didn't know if that was something they just threw in, thinking like, oh, you're gonna forget what happened. Right. During this 12-minute intermission, and we just want to get you back into the film.
No, I'm pretty sure that was because he pops up for like 3 short sentences, and they're all like in the same chapter or like right after, like the chapter, like beginning of the next chapter, kind of. And it rubbed me the wrong way. Don't think it was very well done. I know, now that I'm already on like this Quentin Tarantino not so, I kind of want to jump into a topic that's not so. You know what? Like, first of all, let's just say, no, yeah, I'll go right into it.
Yeah, go.
Okay, so
It's gonna come out eventually.
So let's talk about the N-word in the. Let's talk about the elephant in the room.
How many fingers the podcast discusses the N-word? When you should use it, if you should use it. What does it mean? What is the N-word?
So this.
All right, a little bit of context.
Okay.
Immediately before this, his last film is Django Unchained.
Right.
A film directly about a certain aspect of the black experience, namely slavery and mistreatment of African Americans way back in time.
Right.
Although not that long ago. Not long enough for that word to be okay.
Yeah.
But I liked Django Unchained a lot, and I felt that the use of that word worked with Django Unchained given the content of what it was covering. And it was serving a purpose in that movie to essentially show that, you know, how wicked a lot of these characters are, how little they thought of African Americans and blacks. Right. And it works in that way because when they use it, you immediately feel less towards these white slave owners, Leonardo DiCaprio, and then even Samuel L. Jackson's character in that movie, who is essentially on the white side.
Right, yeah.
And he's not above using that word. And I thought it worked in that movie, and I was okay with the overuse of it because it was meant to make you feel uncomfortable because it's an uncomfortable topic, and that's what the whole film is about.
Right.
Then we come to the Hateful Eight. Hateful Eight ends up being about that, but it didn't have to be about that. And essentially the core of the movie is not about that.
Right, yeah.
So we've had many a discussion amongst ourselves about this, and it almost seems like Quentin is just finding excuses through time period and characters that he inserts in order to use words that make people feel uncomfortable, because that's what his movies are all about. Right. They're all essentially, you know, derivatives of Grindhouse in a way, where it's just trying to make you feel super uncomfortable through the violence, through coarse language, you know, not so much sex. There's not a lot of sex in Quentin Tarantino movies, but just the way characters are, you know, the visuals and whatnot. Right. And I think he uses the N-word as sort of like a quick shortcut to making people feel uncomfortable.
Oh, definitely, right.
And he looks at, you know, the Hateful Eight. All right, well, it's going to be placed in a time where white people did hate black people. So let me put a black character in there, and we can use the N-word literally every 5 minutes. And every time we refer to this character, to the point where we don't know his name anymore because people just call him N-word. Yeah.
No, and that is kind of what bothered me. I mean, there's one black cast member, and the N-word is used somewhere between 70 and 80 times during this film. And, you know, much like, you know, beating the shit out of Jennifer Jason Leigh, you know, you get the feeling pretty early on that the N-word is just going to become this reoccurring punchline.
Yeah, and I mean, in Django, there were good characters that you could root for that were, you know, either not using the word or were just good characters. So they were, you know, kind of differentiated in that way because of this being essentially just a room full of 8 shitty people. They all use the word besides Samuel L. Jackson, but he's not a great character either.
Right. Yeah.
So there's no one really to relate to, and you kind of just end up hating everyone. But then at the same time, since there's no one really to root for, everyone kind of gets these comedic lines that kind of make you empathize with them, when you shouldn't. After like the language that they've used and the acts that they've done, you're still kind of, oh, that's a funny line, oh, that's funny, you know. It's in the same way that where it's wrong to kind of laugh at a man beating a woman as a punchline, the N-word essentially becomes a punchline in this, where he keeps using it to refer to Samuel L. Jackson, and that's what and that's when it starts to feel wrong to laugh at it, because there's somebody writing this who's a white guy,
and it reminded me of Samuel L. Jackson in Pulp Fiction, where the repetitive use of the F word, or I mean, I can say that, fuck, you know, like the repetitive use. Whoa, the repetitive use of fuck. The repetitive use of fuck became like a punchline, and that's essentially what the N-word became in this film, like as opposed to that film. Except like I wasn't laughing anymore, like, you know, it's like it
accomplished what it set out to do, to make you feel uncomfortable, but. It's like Quentin Tarantino, he's a smart guy. Like he's a very talented writer. He could have easily, you know, worked around having to overuse it and still made us feel uncomfortable. We've talked about this before. We'll talk about it more when we review that movie. But in The Revenant,
Right.
they do use the N-word in terms of referring to Native Americans. They call them tree N-word.
Right.
But they use it once.
Yeah.
And then you realize, okay, this character feels that way about that race of people.
Right.
We don't need to hear him say it every other time. We've
Exactly.
got, from saying it once, you know something about a person.
And I mean, as a viewer, as a personal viewer, like I spent a majority of the film just feeling uncomfortable. I mean, me as a white guy feeling uncomfortable. I honestly can't imagine what it's like for a person of color to sit there and watch this film, knowing like a white guy, Quentin Tarantino, wrote the film. You know, like.
And it's also like, I mean, like I understand that you know, I'm sure that this is probably generally true to what that time period was like.
Right, definitely.
They didn't care back then. They were going to use that word a lot. But, I mean, there is a line in terms of realism in film that, you know, you do have to make artistic choices because, you know, like characters pee and eat all the time, but we don't have a million scenes in a movie of, you know, characters taking shits or, you know, eating all the time. There's a little bit of room for suspension of disbelief where we would not doubt how these characters felt about black people if we only heard it once or twice from each character.
Exactly. I don't know. Quentin Tarantino just reminds me of like that kid who listens to rap only to say like the N-word out loud in his car, and like as he's saying it, he kind of makes this peripheral like eye contact with you and to just be like, it's okay that I'm saying it because he's saying it, and this is just a song, which is another thing where it's like you can't always dismiss it because it's some sort of form of art, kind of. Yeah. And I don't know.
And it's also like when you take like the, you know, like you said before, the characters are saying it, but a white guy wrote it. And when you take that context outside of it, like we made reference to this, we made a joke about it earlier with the Fraternal Order of Police, but there was this whole controversy because surrounding this film in particular, because Quentin was protesting on behalf of the Black Lives Matter movement.
Right.
So he is obviously someone that cares very deeply about race. Like, I don't think it's a case of him just being this blatant racist that's like, yeah, I'm going to get that N-word in there every chance I get to put them in their place. Like, I think he cares. And I think in some kind of misguided way, he thought he was helping by having these, you know, horrible white characters saying the N-word all the time and then giving black characters opportunity for black vengeance. But hey, we already did it in Django. Like, you told that story. You're a better writer. You can write something different, you know, a new kind of vengeance story that maybe doesn't have anything to do about race, because you already did that in Django and in Inglourious Basterds with you know, Jews. But yeah, and then in terms of, he's obviously someone that's protesting on their behalf, but then he does, there's a difference between like being like an ally and like taking things into your own hands like just too much. And I think this is definitely a case of that. And then going even further, he wasn't nominated for the Golden Globe. I don't think so, but Ennio Morricone, is that his name? Was nominated. I don't know if he couldn't be there, if he just didn't want to go up there and accept, because I think he's getting pretty old now. But Quentin Tarantino went up to accept the award for Best Original Score on his behalf. And during that, he had a very weird moment where he was talking about how much he thought of Ennio Morricone. And he's like, you know, he's not just my favorite movie composer, that ghetto. Meaning to say, like, he's my favorite composer. Like, I would compare him to, like, Mozart. Right. But it was just a very strange word choice given the content of this film. Like, if he's going to, you know, not that I've really heard him defend it at all, but if you're going to put a movie out like this kind of under the guise of, you know, black vengeance and, you know, realism in film and stuff like that, then you have to be careful with the other words you're going to use in real life. Because we do understand that you're the person that wrote this movie. You're the one responsible for, you know, however many hundred uses of the word in this movie. And then even Jamie Foxx comes on stage later. And who was with him on Django Unchained. And he verbally shows his disapproval, which is, again, like you said, really bad, because Jamie Foxx was literally the protagonist in his last film. Like, it's not far off. Like, and that's the thing. Like, I think most people understood in Django, like, this makes sense. This is what the movie is about. Like, it would be a bad artistic choice to not use the word that much in Django, I feel. Still, I mean, I don't know. Obviously, this isn't his first offense with the N-word. He's used it in a lot of films. I said all of his films the other day. I don't think that was correct, but a majority. I think it's fair to say.
Django Unchained, he really reached deep with that one, because I looked it up online, and it came out to about 120 or 130 times that they use it during that film. And, it was used more appropriately. But I still had my reservations. Like, Tarantino's choice to use a Rick Ross song in that soundtrack.
Yeah.
Which was back to back with a scene of Leonardo DiCaprio throwing around the N-word. So that's Leonardo DiCaprio and then Rick Ross saying the N-word back to back. In any other context, that would be trouble. That would be career ending. But again, it's under the veil of, like you said, a black revenge story, and it's a different time. But it's not 12 Years a Slave. It's not fucking Huckleberry Finn, it's just completely different.
I mean, I like Django, so it's not that I let it slide, but right. I think once was enough. We got the point.
Exactly. Right.
You got
130 times? Yeah.
Oh
my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, it was used a lot. But then I think kind of the bigger overarching point about this N-word is that Quentin, throughout his career, has been someone that doesn't like to be told no. He does not like to be censored in any way.
Exactly.
That's why his films are always violent. That's why his films feature characters that make you feel uncomfortable, and that's why there's a lot of coarse language and obviously racial slurs and stuff like this, because he's usually not writing about the best moral characters.
Right.
And I think this is just another example of that, where not that anyone directly told him no. I don't know if there was ever any discussion, but he knew what society was going to think when he put that in here.
Right.
And he said, tough luck, I'm going to do it anyway. And he did not want to be censored. And I think maybe he's bearing the brunt of that by the fact that this was largely ignored by the Oscars.
Right. Yeah. And again, I mean, like you said, in big text shows up during that first scene. It's the 8th film by Quentin Tarantino. Obviously, this far in his career, he's surrounded by yes men. No one is telling him no. Nobody's editing his work, because we've seen such great screenwriting work from him. So people just have to be yeah, I guess. I don't know.
Okay, Quentin, sure.
Yeah. But I mean, that's not the only complaint I have with this film.
No, let's definitely get back into the film itself.
I don't know if I want to talk about the film on the broader sense or go into different scenes of the film, but I feel like Tarantino has he builds tension so well in this film.
Yeah.
And it's so expertly done, and again, that's through his great gift of screenwriting. But I feel like he only really knows, he builds up this tension the entire film, but I feel like he only really knows one payoff, and that's gratuitous amounts of violence.
Yeah.
For once, I'd love to see Tarantino direct a film that isn't payback related. Somehow, we start with this film that isn't payback related as Django, and it just literally kind of folds the page back into what he was doing with Django.
Well, it's kind of, with the payback thing, it's another excuse for him to justify
violence,
using that much violence, just the vengeance is a way for him to justify the N-word in these past two movies.
Exactly.
It's just he keeps finding ways to be how can I defend myself when someone says, why is there so much violence in these movies?
Right.
Although generally he tends to go for other defenses like that, it's just fun.
Right, yeah. I don't know, but I would love to see after all these years, a non-payback related film.
Yeah.
I'm really curious to see what that would look like.
Or one that didn't rely on violence as a plot point.
My gosh,
essentially,
yeah.
Because there's violence just inherent in all of his films, and I know that he is a big fan of spaghetti westerns, so there's obviously a lot of violence in that, and kung fu movies and stuff like that. So obviously he's got his influences in heavily violent genres.
Right.
I just feel like he's got so much talent when it comes to dialogue and stuff like that. Even in this, even if you're able to look past the N-word in this movie, which is very hard because it's everywhere.
Yeah,
but just the exchanges between characters and the introductions of characters and the way we learn about characters is fantastic in this movie. He does have pure talent in that area. Which is why I think it may, not to keep coming back to the N-word, but it's hard to get around it. I think it makes the use of it more egregious because he could have worked around it. He has the talent. He knows how to write his way around like everything and how to introduce stuff and to plant stuff for payoffs later. And he doesn't do that in this movie.
I do want to, looking past all of my complaints, because this completely contradicts everything, including complaints I haven't even verbalized yet, I do think some of my favorite imagery, or one of my favorite scenes, is when Samuel L. Jackson's character is talking to Bruce Dern's character about how he killed his son. And it's essentially Samuel L. Jackson, there's a very large bounty on his head because of what he's done with the military, in the military. So
During the Civil War, yeah.
supposedly, which it's not, I assume it's not true, because he's just trying to get Bruce Dern going. So he can
Bruce
rightfully...
Dern's character is a Confederate Civil War general, who was known during the Civil War for having executed a lot of African Americans.
Right.
So that's why Samuel Jackson's targeting him in particular. But go on, sorry.
So I believe Samuel Jackson kills both these guys' friends, and then he learns that the one guy is Bruce Dern's son, the son of a general. So he leads them into just snowy, just
wilderness,
cold mountains, and he said like the boy was just like begging for a blanket. He wasn't even begging to die, or just to be set free. He just wanted a blanket. And Samuel Jackson's character says, "All right, I'll give you a blanket if you suck my dick." We're just like, which is just, and he's like, and he did. And he's like, I didn't even have a blanket for him. He's like, I just like let him suck my dick, and it was like fantastic. And just like the soundtrack swelling as like Samuel Jackson, like they had like a flashback scene of this, and he's got his arms raised in the air, and he's screaming while this guy is doing this to him, and it's just like such a funny, bizarre.
It's also like there's the scene in the trailer where he's like, "Oh, you're starting to see pictures, ain't you?" That's from that scene there after he's describing this whole thing to Bruce Dern. He says, "You're starting to see pictures, ain't you?"
And it's such a. Again, it's just a golden Tarantino moment, and I think there's so few of them in here that you really appreciate that one. But aside from that, was there really any purpose of Bruce Dern's character, really? I feel like he's almost only in the screenplay because Quentin Tarantino was like, I got a great idea for a scene, kind of, because like the guys that come in and...
I mean, I guess not that he plays a huge part, but he is a part of sort of the twist towards the end of the movie. I don't know if we want to get into that yet. Maybe save that for the end.
Well, let's talk about that now.
All right.
How much...
We're at 42 minutes, so...
Oh, geez. Yeah, let's get into it now. So, I mean, if you want to explain that.
Yeah, well, I guess, spoiler alert, so they arrive at the cabin. There's 8 of them, and basically the Kurt Russell character is very cautious. He keeps asking everyone, if I'm going to be in here for a weekend with you guys, I'm not going to spend it with people I don't know who you are.
Right.
So he keeps asking everyone to introduce themselves and explain themselves. And after all that, I forget who he says it to, but he's basically, someone here is not who they say they are. And basically the movie ends up turning into like a darker version of like Clue, where it's like,
right, exactly.
Not that anything's been done yet, but they're, who is telling the lie here? And it's kind of like a mystery theater type thing going on.
Right.
And they keep kind of giving you like hints throughout, like someone will act suspicious here and whatnot. But the twist is really something that there was not really anything planted for this kind of payoff. And the twist essentially happens. Daisy or someone else poisons the coffee, but Daisy knows about it. Coffee is a big part in this. They're coming in from the cold and they're drinking coffee. And Kurt Russell's character drinks the coffee, literally vomits blood all over Daisy Domergue, which is a disgusting scene.
Yeah, it's pretty gross.
I'm usually okay with violence, but that was when I had trouble watching at that point. And then his stagecoach driver is also killed at that point. Walton Goggins' character doesn't drink the coffee because he's warned about it. So then at that point, Samuel L. Jackson basically rounds everyone up and has them against the wall and is basically like, someone here poisoned the coffee. I knew Walton Goggins didn't do it.
Because he was about to drink it.
Because he was about to drink it. So he gives him a gun. They're facing everyone against the wall. And he's basically going one by one, like explaining, like, could it be this guy because of this? Could it be this guy because of this? There's a character, I think they just call him the Mexican. I forget what his actual name is in it. He thinks he's involved in some way, although he doesn't think he poisoned the coffee. So then he thinks there's two people that did it. I'm dragging on here, but the point is that it's this huge buildup, and then the payoff is as he's about to shoot at someone, a gunshot comes from underneath the floorboard into his nuts. And there was a guy that was underneath the floorboard the entire time that we literally had no hints about, and that was the twist, essentially, of the movie.
Right.
And
then they go into a whole flashback about like these four guys plus the fifth who's under the floorboards. This was actually a part of a larger operation, and they kill everybody that's in there, which you kind of expect anyway, because they're like, well, Minnie would never do this. And
because she's not at Minnie's haberdashery. It's run by the Mexican, and Samuel Jackson's been there before, so he keeps saying stuff like, oh, that doesn't sound like Minnie to leave, the haberdashery in your hands, Minnie doesn't allow hats inside, or, Minnie's coffee does not taste like this, whatnot.
And it's just, overall, I don't like... I hate that flashback scene. I think it's kind of one of those things where like literally Quentin decides to show everything, where instead of having like, some sort of like through the character you can discover like who's been here, what's happened kind of thing. Instead he decides to go back in time and waste,
actually show us,
waste even
essentially
more
a whole
time.
Chapter.
There's nothing creative about like these four guys just walk into there and kill everybody. There's nothing creative about that
it's
at
not
all.
like a heist or something that they like.
And then they kind of just talk about how they want to rescue the Jennifer Jason Leigh character, and then they just kind of like set up. I don't know.
It was, there was nothing rewarding about it. There was nothing clever about it. It was essentially Deus Ex Machina, or whatever, how you pronounce it. Like it came out of nowhere. It's something that was probably it felt like it was written. Like Quentin got to this point and was like, all right, how does this end?
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like, where's the payoff here? And he just kind of wrote that in. And also Channing Tatum's character, who is the guy hidden under the floorboard. He's the gangster, or the gang member. He's basically the leader of this huge gang.
And he's her brother.
Yeah. I didn't think his performance was that great.
They sound so wildly different in their accents and like the way they...
Well, yeah, because she's like backwoods, like, he's an effing N-word, which she says a million times.
And then he's kind of a more pronounced sort of like Southern gentleman. Yeah, kind of. And you're like...
And he speaks French. And...
Yeah, it is so confusing about... How are they related? How are they siblings?
Yeah,
like,
just
obviously
weird character choices. I mean, and no one in the gang really felt like they should have all been together.
No.
So it was just kind of like it wasn't a payoff. It was just something that you had to accept as true because Quentin Tarantino said this is what the movie is now.
Right, exactly.
Rather than having, planted stuff beforehand for us to, like, there was never like anything where someone was like, what was that?
Right, exactly.
And looked at the floor and was like, oh, I'm going crazy. There was no hints whatsoever that anyone was under the floor or that floorboard. There was anything,
and it was Deus Ex Machina. Yeah. So you want to...
Yeah, I guess it's time to...
Talk about some fingers?
Wrap this thing up. Probably should have thought about... Did I write down? No, I didn't write down how many fingers I want to give this.
I didn't write down how many fingers for any of these films we're going to cover today. It's going to be an interesting day. I think I'll go first though. I'm going to give this 3.5 fingers.
Really? That's higher than I thought you would go.
Higher?
Yeah.
I was going to give it 3.
Don't change it.
Okay. I'm going to go 3.5 fingers just because it's still I felt like I went too high. Damn it, Mike. You talk me. Whatever. I'm just going to give it 3.5.
All right.
Overall, I guess my small piece on this overall, and it's everything that I've already gone over, aside from the slapstick and aside from the shock, the talent in this film is pretty obvious. Whether it's the writing overlooking some of the things that we just mentioned, or the ensemble cast, again, overlooking Jennifer Jason Leigh and
Channing Tatum
and everybody really involved. Kurt Russell was fantastic. Really, I don't know. Love that
Samuel Jackson, too, I thought.
Yeah, definitely. However, the talents overall just seemed pretty wasted on just empty notions, really. And it felt really uncomfortably close to Reservoir Dogs at some points. Just in a really unoriginal way, kind of.
Just in terms of there being, like, a lot of characters with weird...
Well, yeah. and
violent backstories, I guess.
Yeah, and the plot points and stuff. There was a lot of similarities that I won't even go into. But I feel like
and the flashback thing, too.
Yeah. And I feel like, in conclusion, I feel like the best way to describe this film is that it's a film that Quentin Tarantino's made before, but he's done it better the first time around.
Yeah.
So 3.5 fingers. Should have gone lower, but I'm going to settle at 3.5 fingers.
Well, I'll probably even you out there.
All right, cool. Go for it.
I mean, I think the most obvious thing is just how long this movie is. And it's like movies can be long, but for a movie to work of any length, you have to forget that you're in the theater. Right. You have to be completely transformed by this experience. And I think for a while, I mean, the overture doesn't help for the 70mm version, just because when has that ever been in a movie for us before? So immediately you're just like, all right, when is this going to end? This is weird. I just want to watch the movie already.
Right, yeah.
The lack of previews, just the whole experience, it kind of ruins the immersion to begin with. And then you get in there and it's very long. It's literally like with the overture and the opening shot, almost like 15 minutes before you hear someone talk.
Yeah.
And then we just get into a lot of talking, and then you have the N-word come up and just stuff that it's constantly breaking the immersion for me.
Right.
And then you have to sit through that for like 3 hours. And then combined with the fact that like we got there like half an hour early.
Right.
I was essentially sitting down. If you didn't get up during the intermission, you're sitting down for about 4 hours if you get there on time a little bit earlier, which is just, no matter how good any movie is, that's too long to be in a seat in a theater. Like literally it hurt my ass to be in the seat that long.
Yeah.
So it's hard to really get into any kind of movie with a positive feeling based on the length. So I would go with that as a definite negative to this movie.
Okay.
Especially because it's not like there was 3 hours in this movie of like groundwork being laid down for this great payoff at the end.
Right.
It was just 3 hours of Quentin Tarantino dialogue, which is good. But in other movies, there's been something to reward you for sitting through long dialogue at the end, where there was no payoff at the end besides just violence, but it wasn't like a plant and payoff type thing. It was just, all right, well, now they're shooting each other, so deal with it. So I didn't think that was great. But it is beautiful, especially in the 70mm. Just the detail and everything is great. And especially even for just being a one location essentially film, they did do a lot of cool things, like the shot. I really like the kind of panning shot over the ceiling boards or whatever you would call those.
Right, yeah.
A lot of shots, just inventive shots for it just being in essentially this cabin that were really cool, and it looked beautiful. Obviously, Quentin Tarantino's dialogue is great, and I thought the acting was decent throughout. I mean, even Channing Tatum, like, it's more just he pales in comparison to some of the other great actors in this, like Kurt Russell and Samuel Jackson. Even Walton Goggins is great. I mean, pretty much everyone is they serve their part to this. But yeah, it seemed like something that probably should have just been like a Broadway play or something like that, because it's one location.
Yeah.
And then in the Broadway play, you could have the part where you could have Channing Tatum. You could see him, like, you know, if it's kind of like a split down the middle of the cabin, and you can see underneath the floorboard. And even if he's not talking, he can be reacting to someone saying something to his sister. Like, that would have been like brilliant in my mind. Like, I would have paid, way more than $18 to see a Quentin Tarantino Broadway play, because that's what it felt like. And I think that it is derivative of the fact that when this was originally written, it was literally just a screenplay that he got some Quentin Tarantino regulars around a table and they read. Right. And then everyone liked it so much, it was just like, why don't we make this a movie? They have that somewhere in the playbill, the story of that. And that's evident, I think, in the screenwriting. But I think ultimately it was a mistake to turn it into a film.
Oh, definitely.
And it should have either stayed just as that, where not everyone's going to hear the N-word used a million times, or in Broadway, where those kind of artistic choices there's a little more leniency in Broadway towards realism in that way. So I think I'd probably have to go with just 2.5 stars.
Okay.
Just right down the middle. There were some really good things about this movie that I did enjoy, but as a theater experience, it was pretty unbearable. And there's some things that I think are just kind of unforgivable about this movie. So it's hard to give it a positive score. So 2.5 fingers.
All right. So I think that evens us out to 3 fingers.
Yeah, I'm not even gonna get the calculator out for that.
Right, yeah.
We've learned by now it's 3 fingers.
You know what? It's so weird, because I was just thinking, I was like, I'm gonna bring up that this should have been some sort of stage play. And especially, I think the one thing that really like made me say that is like every time they kick open that door and then everybody in the house turns up to them and screams. Like
It's
felt like a play.
It's humor that's like it literally felt like a staging on film of,
or even
a
the
Broadway
slapstick
play.
humor. It would have worked better in a theater. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, you stupid bitch, and like slap her,
Yeah.
like kind of like thing. Like that's play humor, because you have to be loud and you have to be very exaggerated,
over the top, and
that's what this
especially
was.
With,
It was
physical acts have
like-
to be over the top.
like everybody like screaming about the door. I was like, all right, they get it. Like, you got to use 2 boards.
Yeah.
It's like,
And it was funny, but it
yeah.
would have been funnier on a Broadway play or
Right.
a stage play somewhere,
right,
or even just like a filming of a staged version of it.
right.
Could have done well.
All right. So
3 fingers for Quentin. Don't call 911 because the cops aren't going to help you out, Quentin. Yeah, so let's sign out.
all right. Well, I'm glad this isn't prominent in the Oscars.
Yes, very bad.
So my name's Joe,
And I'm Mike.
and
Fuck you, Quentin.
fuck you, Queen. This is the police union. Don't you ever come to the police union. We're not gonna talk to you.